Pete Buttigieg thought he had set the stage perfectly. Standing at the podium during a high-profile congressional hearing on transportation infrastructure, the normally polished transportation secretary saw a chance to slip in a clever remark. Representative Jasmine Crockett had just wrapped up a passionate statement about funding disparities in her Texas district, and Buttigieg couldn't resist. With his trademark smile, he said, "Well, Representative Crockett, maybe if your district focused more on genuine transportation needs instead of stretching the definition of infrastructure, we'd have more to work with." The room froze. Cameras caught every second. What Buttigieg intended as a light-hearted jab at progressive priorities was about to spiral into one of his most damaging public moments in years. Within minutes, the clip would circulate everywhere, and Jasmine Crockett was ready to show millions of Americans why underestimating a Congresswoman from Texas is always a mistake. Make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss how this political clash unfolds. You'll want to see what happens next. Pete Buttigieg, former presidential candidate, Harvard graduate, and transportation secretary, had built a career on composure and intellect. At 42, he was known for staying calm under pressure, a Democratic Party favorite for his sharp communication style and ability to manage tough questioning with ease. But on this day, that confidence threatened to become his undoing. He had come before the House Transportation Committee to testify on infrastructure spending, facing repeated challenges from Republicans pressing him on every dollar allocated. This was familiar ground for him. C-SPAN cameras, reporters packed in, millions watching live. Meanwhile, Representative Jasmine Crockett, 43, a first-term Congresswoman from Texas, had been in Washington for only 2 years, but already carried a reputation for refusing to back down. A civil rights attorney with a law degree from the University of Houston, she had spent her career fighting for underserved communities before bringing that same resolve to Capitol Hill. She represented Texas's 30th district, including parts of Dallas and its suburbs, home to predominantly Black and Hispanic families who had long struggled with crumbling roads, failing bridges, and inadequate public transit. For her, infrastructure wasn't an abstract talking point. It was the lived experience of her constituents. The hearing had followed a predictable script until Crockett's 5 minutes arrived. Armed with charts, photos, and statistics, she laid out the deep funding gaps between her district and wealthier areas. Her frustration was clear as she described families missing work because buses were cut, seniors unable to access hospitals because public transit was unreliable, and roads so broken they were dangerous. "Secretary Buttigieg," she said, holding up a photograph of a pothole that looked like a crater. "This is infrastructure in my district. We've asked for help for years, and we keep hearing there's no money. Yet somehow other districts always get funded, especially those that already have functioning roads." Her words carried the weight of someone who had lived these realities. This wasn't political theater for Crockett. It was personal. That exchange highlighted more than one moment in a committee room. It exposed a clash shaping American politics in 2024. Buttigieg represented the polished academic wing of the Democratic Party, comfortable in think tanks and policy circles. Crockett embodied the grassroots drive reshaping the party from the ground up. Cameras were rolling, social media was watching, and the country was about to see what happens when privilege collides with principle. Up until that point, Buttigieg had handled the hearing with ease. Republicans came at him with predictable talking points: government waste, inefficiency, reckless spending, and he deflected with data, technical expertise, and well-rehearsed responses. He rattled off statistics, cited studies, and left opponents looking unprepared. The hearing room settled into a familiar rhythm. Republicans attacked, Buttigieg defended with precision, and Democrats offered friendly questions to highlight the administration's successes. This was his comfort zone, where preparation and intellect gave him every advantage. When Crockett's turn came, however, he treated her like just another freshman looking to score points for her district. His staff had briefed him, but only at surface level, her age, background, demographics of her district. What they had not grasped was her reputation for meticulous preparation and courtroom-style persistence. She treated hearings like cases to win. Most representatives asked a few questions, made funding requests, and moved on. Buttigieg's team had strategies to handle those interactions efficiently, but Crockett had studied those same strategies and came ready with countermeasures. "Secretary Buttigieg," she continued, voice steady but carrying frustration, "I want to show you something your department's data doesn't capture." She held up her phone, playing a video from her district. "This is Mrs. Dorothy Johnson. She's 73, a retired school cafeteria worker who raised 5 children on her own. She lives on $200 a month. Last week, she missed her dialysis appointment, an appointment that keeps her alive, because bus number 47 broke down for the 4th time this month." Crockett's voice gained strength as she explained. "There's no backup bus in her neighborhood because your efficiency metrics decided low-income routes don't justify reserves. The next bus wasn't due for 3 hours. So Mrs. Johnson, who weighs barely 110 pounds and walks with a cane, had to walk 2 miles in 95-degree Texas heat to get to her clinic. By the time she arrived, she had missed her appointment. She had to wait until the next day. 24 hours without treatment she needs 3 times a week to stay alive. All because we can't keep one bus running in neighborhoods where families can't afford alternatives." The room went silent. Staffers stopped shuffling papers, stopped checking phones. This wasn't politics. It was a stark picture of how bureaucratic decisions translate into life-or-death consequences. "Mrs. Johnson isn't asking for designer bike lanes or high-tech traffic systems," Crockett said firmly. "She just wants a bus that works." Buttigieg's expression remained neutral, the kind of composure years of media training had drilled into him. But viewers could see him glance at his notes more often, searching for a polished policy response. He was still treating this like another committee hearing, not realizing Crockett was forcing the conversation out of statistics and into lived reality. "Representative Crockett," he replied, tone measured but slightly dismissive, "I understand your concerns about transportation equity. We've allocated considerable resources to urban transit, and your district has received federal funding through multiple programs." He went on listing grants and initiatives, offering the kind of technical detail that usually satisfied members of Congress, but Crockett wasn't finished. "With respect, Secretary Buttigieg," she said firmly, "I'm not asking for a policy lecture. I'm asking why my constituents can't get to work, can't reach a doctor, can't even buy groceries," Crockett pressed. "These aren't figures on a spreadsheet. These are real people facing real problems." And this is where Buttigieg made his critical mistake. Instead of recognizing the human cost behind her testimony, he fell back on the instincts drilled into him through media training: pivot to policy, avoid vulnerability, reframe the question. But this time, that instinct would cost him. "Well, Representative Crockett," he said, leaning forward with a practiced smile, "maybe if your district focused more on actual transportation needs instead of what some might call creative interpretations of infrastructure, we'd have more resources to work with." The silence was immediate and heavy. Members looked up from their phones. Staff froze in place. Cameras caught every reaction as the weight of Buttigieg's words landed. He had just implied that a black congresswoman from one of the poorest districts in Texas was exaggerating her community's needs, that their struggles weren't real infrastructure concerns. For a moment, no one moved. Crockett sat completely still, her expression unreadable. Committee Chair Maria Gonzalez looked stunned. Even Republicans who had come prepared to criticize Buttigieg themselves seemed taken aback by the dismissive tone. Realizing his blunder, Buttigieg tried to recover. "What I meant was—" But Crockett raised her hand. No, Secretary Buttigieg. I heard exactly what you meant. Her voice was calm, but the intensity beneath it was unmistakable. Social media lit up instantly. Clips of the exchange spread with captions like, "Did he really just say that?" and "The privilege is showing," within minutes. But creative interpretations was trending nationwide. What Buttigieg hadn't realized was that he had handed Crockett the perfect opening. As a civil rights attorney, she had spent years confronting this kind of dismissive rhetoric from government officials. She had seen too many leaders brush aside real concerns with polite condescension. But this time was different. She had a national stage, live cameras, and a cabinet secretary who had just revealed more than he intended. Crockett had grown up in neighborhoods where politicians made promises during election season and disappeared after. She had represented clients who were told their struggles weren't legitimate. Now, with 5 minutes left in her questioning, she was prepared to deliver a response Buttigieg would never forget. Leaning back slightly, a faint smile crossed her face, the same expression colleagues had seen when she delivered closing arguments that left opposing counsel speechless. "Creative interpretations of infrastructure," she repeated, her voice sharp with disbelief. "Secretary Buttigieg, let me be sure I understand. You're suggesting that my constituents' need for working buses, safe roads, and reliable bridges amounts to some kind of exaggeration?" Sensing trouble, Buttigieg tried to clarify. "Representative Crockett, I think there may have been a misunderstanding. I was referring to some of the broader definitions of infrastructure." "No, sir," Crockett cut in, her tone firm. "There's no misunderstanding here. You just told a national audience that the transportation needs of my district, predominantly Black and Hispanic families, are somehow less legitimate than projects elsewhere. You dismissed our basic need for functioning public transit as creative interpretations." She reached for a folder on the desk. This wasn't a routine binder of staff-prepared talking points. It was material she had personally compiled over months of research, poring over Department of Transportation databases late into the night. Her legal background had taught her that the strongest cases weren't won by passion alone, but with evidence so overwhelming that opponents had no escape. "Let me educate you on what real infrastructure needs look like," Crockett began. She held up a large chart mapping transportation spending across Texas over the last decade. The picture was unmistakable. Wealthy districts glowed in deep green, signaling high per capita funding. Districts like hers appeared in alarming shades of red. But she wasn't stopping at one exhibit. One by one, she produced document after document, each selected to build an airtight case. Districts with median household incomes above $75,000 received an average of $847 per capita in federal transportation funding, she explained. Districts like mine, with median incomes under $45,000, received just $312 per capita. And here's the outrage. My constituents are 3 times more likely to depend on public transit than residents in those wealthier districts. Another paper came out. This analysis shows the highest ridership districts receive the lowest per capita federal investment. Meanwhile, districts where most people drive luxury cars to work get the most federal money for infrastructure they barely need. Buttigieg shifted uncomfortably in his chair. This was not the exchange he expected with a first-term representative. His usual strategy of deflecting with broad policy language and citing departmental achievements was collapsing against her thorough preparation. His staff scrambled behind him, flipping through briefing binders for data to counter her. But Crockett had anticipated that too. Every number she cited came with citations, every point backed by multiple sources. "Representative Crockett," Buttigieg began again, trying to regain footing, "funding is distributed through a complex formula that factors in population density, existing infrastructure, and—" "Stop right there," Crockett said, cutting him off. She raised her hand. "Don't you dare lecture me about formulas. I've spent the last 2 years reviewing every line of your budget. I know exactly how those decisions are made and who gets prioritized. She pulled out another document. Here's one example. Your department approved $45 million for a bike path expansion in a district with a median income of $89,000. Beautiful project, I'm sure. But you denied my district's $8 million request to replace buses over 15 years old that break down weekly. The committee room was silent except for the clicking of cameras and the buzz of phones recording reactions. You want to talk about creative interpretations? She pressed on. Let me tell you what's creative. Your department approved a $23 million parking garage in suburban Connecticut and called it essential infrastructure. Yet in my district, bus stops where families wait in 100-degree heat don't qualify for federal shade structure funding because you call those amenities, not infrastructure. Buttigieg adjusted his tie, glancing toward his aides for help. But Crockett wasn't done. Here's another example. Your department spent $67 million on a smart traffic system in a district where the biggest traffic problem is choosing which Tesla to drive. Meanwhile, in my district, we've had traffic lights broken for 3 years. 2 fatal accidents could have been prevented with basic maintenance. Her voice rose, carrying years of pent-up frustration. You sit there in a designer suit with a Harvard education and a cabinet-level salary, and you have the audacity to suggest my constituents' needs aren't legitimate. You mock the struggles of working families who just want a bus that won't break down on their way to work. The camera zoomed in on Buttigieg. Gone was the confident, media-trained secretary. In his place sat someone visibly rattled, unprepared for the force of her challenge. And here's what truly concerns me, Secretary Buttigieg, Crockett said, holding up her final document. While you mock my district's creative interpretations, I did some research on your own city of South Bend, Indiana. His expression changed instantly. He knew where this was headed. During your time as mayor, South Bend received $34 million in federal transportation funding. That's $387 per resident. My district, with twice the population and 3 times the poverty rate, receives $150 per resident. Can you explain why your constituents deserved more federal investment than mine? The room erupted. Republican members of the committee who had planned to press Buttigieg themselves ended up witnessing a master class in political dismantling. Democrats on the panel looked uneasy, torn between backing a cabinet secretary from their own party and recognizing the validity of their colleagues' criticisms. Buttigieg tried one last time to recover. Representative Crockett, I believe you're mixing different funding sources and timelines. No, I'm not, Crockett replied without hesitation. I'm pointing out exactly what everyone watching can see. You think certain communities deserve better transportation than others, and you're comfortable mocking the ones left behind. She leaned forward, her voice carrying the weight of years spent fighting for overlooked communities. You joked that my constituents' needs were simply creative interpretations of infrastructure. The only creativity here is your department's ability to find money for projects in wealthy districts while insisting nothing is available for working families who actually depend on public transit. While Crockett was steadily dismantling, Buttigieg's credibility, social media lit up. The hashtag Dr. Creative Interpretations was joined by Dr. Crockett Educates Pete and Transportation Equity. Clips of the exchange drew millions of views across platforms. Progressive activists critical of Buttigieg's past presidential run found new fuel. Conservative commentators, though opposed to Crockett on policy, praised her preparation and persistence. Independent viewers saw a stark contrast between a representative fighting for constituents and a secretary who appeared out of touch with everyday struggles. As her time concluded, Crockett delivered a closing statement with the precision of a prosecutor. Secretary Buttigieg, you came here expecting another routine hearing. You thought a clever quip would dismiss my concerns and let you move on, but you miscalculated. My constituents sent me here to fight for them, not to stay polite while their needs are mocked by people who've never worried whether the bus would even show up. She gathered her notes and added with finality, "The next time you joke about transportation equity, remember this exchange. Behind every request you dismiss as creative are real families trying to build better lives. Some of us won't stay quiet when our communities are disrespected." The room went silent as Chair Gonzalez called a recess. Buttigieg sat at the witness table, no longer the confident official who had walked in. He had been outmaneuvered by someone he underestimated, and the country had seen it unfold live. Within half an hour, clips of the exchange trended on every major platform. The original video of Buttigieg's creative interpretations comment hit 2 million views on Twitter alone, while longer versions of Crockett's rebuttal spread even faster. Journalists scrambled to add context, and cable networks shifted programming to cover what was already being labeled one of the sharpest congressional takedowns in years. The administration's communications team rushed into damage control. Statements about misunderstandings or comments taken out of context fell flat as more viewers watched the full exchange and recognized the dismissiveness in Buttigieg's words. The hashtag itself evolved as people shared stories of infrastructure neglect in their own communities. Photos of broken bus stops, unsafe intersections, and deteriorating roads flooded feeds, tagged with his phrase. A viral thread from a Detroit transit worker described how bus failures in Black neighborhoods were dismissed as routine, while similar issues in wealthier areas drew immediate emergency response. It ended with, "Apparently wanting buses that run is a creative interpretation of transportation needs." Progressive groups gained momentum from Crockett's performance. Organizations long critical of moderate Democrats' infrastructure strategy cited the hearing as proof that stronger advocates were needed in Congress. Online culture quickly turned the moment into shareable content. Memes featuring Buttigieg's stunned expression spread widely. A popular format showed his confident pre-hearing face next to his shaken mid-hearing look with captions like, "When you tried to dismiss someone who did their homework." TikTok creators began reusing Crockett's phrase, "Let me educate you," as a trending audio clip across unrelated topics, making it a broader symbol of informed pushback against authority. Ironically, the creativity of the response highlighted the disconnect between Buttigieg's remark and the real innovation happening in underserved communities forced to find their own transportation solutions without federal help. Democratic leadership faced a difficult balance. Buttigieg was a rising figure and a key cabinet member, while Crockett was quickly becoming a champion for progressives. Behind closed doors, the debate revealed deeper party tensions over direction and priorities. Progressive Democrats rallied to Crockett's side. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tweeted, "This is what it looks like when someone comes to Congress to fight for their constituents, not to please the establishment." She added, "Transportation equity isn't a creative interpretation. It's basic justice." Other members of the Progressive Caucus echoed the sentiment. Representative Pramila Jayapal stated, "Secretary Buttigieg's comments highlight the gap between this administration's rhetoric about equity and its actual priorities. Congresswoman Crockett showed us what advocacy should look like." Moderates, however, were less comfortable. Some tried to frame the dispute as a misunderstanding but struggled against the clarity of the video. Representative Hakeem Jeffries released a cautious statement calling for ongoing dialogue to ensure fair investment in all communities. Even Republicans weighed in. While opposing increased federal spending, some acknowledged Crockett's preparation. Representative Chip Roy noted on social media, "At least someone in Congress is holding this administration accountable for its priorities, even if I disagree with the solutions." The bipartisan recognition underscored how effectively Crockett had reframed the issue around competence and fairness rather than ideology. Initially, Buttigieg's department tried to brush off the controversy with generic comments about productive dialogue and engaging stakeholders. But as the story spread, they were forced into more detailed responses. A follow-up statement attempted to clarify his remarks and reaffirm a commitment to transportation equity. The effort was widely criticized as too vague and too late, failing to address Crockett's specific data on funding disparities. Privately, career officials inside the department admitted that Crockett's points about inequitable funding formulas were valid and that her arguments had struck a chord far beyond the hearing room. Some welcomed the focus on issues they had been working on for years, even if it came at the secretary's expense. The hearing underscored several important themes in American politics and governance. Crockett's careful dismantling of Buttigieg's arguments showed how strong preparation could outweigh institutional advantages. Her performance proved that newer members of Congress could stand up to senior figures if they did their research and stayed committed to their communities. The difference between Buttigieg's policy-heavy delivery and Crockett's people-centered advocacy highlighted broader debates over how leaders should engage with the public. While Buttigieg's measured tone had worked in other settings, it came across as disconnected when met with real stories of hardship. The exchange also revealed how quickly political moments spread through social media. Traditional communication tactics that relied on shaping the narrative proved ineffective in a world where raw footage could circulate instantly. Crockett's ability to speak genuinely about her district's struggles emphasized the importance of electing representatives who understand their communities firsthand. Her personal experience with transportation challenges gave her a credibility that policy expertise alone could not provide. The exchange reshaped both politicians' careers, but its impact reached far beyond them. For Buttigieg, the hearing signaled growing tension with progressive voters and communities of color who already questioned his grasp of their lived realities. His presidential ambitions, kept alive despite his weak 2020 results with black voters, faced renewed doubts about his ability to build broad coalitions. Industry insiders warned that his effectiveness as secretary could suffer if he were increasingly seen as disconnected from the riders most dependent on public transit. Some Democratic donors expressed quiet concerns, with several major fundraisers shifting their attention toward other rising party figures. The moment quickly became a case study in how one misstep could derail long-term political plans. Inside the Transportation Department, career staff managed the fallout. Some welcomed the new attention to transportation equity, an issue they had worked on for years, even if it came at their leaders' cost. Others worried the controversy might hinder bipartisan cooperation needed for infrastructure projects requiring Republican support. For Crockett, the hearing cemented her reputation as a rising force in progressive politics and validated her method of combining passion with detailed preparation. Her re-election fundraising far exceeded expectations, with small-dollar donations flowing in nationwide. Progressive organizations, searching for new champions after recent setbacks, began viewing her as a future leader in key policy battles. Invitations poured in from universities, advocacy groups, and Democratic organizations. National media outlets that had largely ignored the Texas freshman now sought her out for interviews. Her shift from relative unknown to progressive standard-bearer happened with remarkable speed, underscoring how viral moments can rapidly reshape political careers in the social media era. But this new prominence also brought added expectations. Progressive activists started treating her as a national spokesperson on transportation equity, while Republican opponents now considered her a real threat. Every word would be closely examined, and her future appearances would be measured against the high bar she set during the Buttigieg hearing. The exchange also reinforced the case for electing more diverse representatives who could bring new perspectives to hearings and policy debates. Strategists noted that Crockett's authentic connection to transportation struggles gave her an authority no amount of technical knowledge could equal. Her example encouraged other candidates with similar backgrounds to pursue office, potentially reshaping future congressional classes. The hearing also brought national attention to transportation equity, a topic often overshadowed by larger infrastructure debates. Community groups in underserved areas gained new visibility to share long-standing concerns over unequal funding. Researchers began analyzing the data Crockett cited, with multiple independent reviews confirming her core points about disparities. These findings strengthened her arguments and undercut attempts to dismiss her critique as partisan. Advocacy groups used the moment to push for changes in federal funding formulas that had historically disadvantaged low-income areas and communities of color. The Crockett-Buttigieg exchange quickly became a reference point in political communication and a warning against underestimating opponents. Political scientists highlighted it as proof that preparation, authenticity, and persistence could overcome institutional power. The hearing also reminded observers of the enduring value of congressional oversight, even in today's polarized and fragmented media environment. Journalists reflected on their own coverage, admitting they had initially overlooked the weight of Buttigieg's comment and the sharpness of Crockett's response. The incident sparked broader discussions about how hearings are often framed around conflict rather than substantive debate. Crockett's data-based critique offered a model for how representatives could maximize their questioning time. As the immediate dust settled, the long-term consequences became clearer. The moment shifted transportation policy debates, elevated equity in infrastructure spending, and set new expectations for congressional accountability. For millions of Americans who depend on public transit, Crockett's defense of their needs offered reassurance that their voices were finally being heard at the highest levels. Her vow to continue pushing for fairer transportation policies resonated beyond her district. The confrontation also signaled to other officials that dismissing constituent concerns would increasingly meet sharp challenges from representatives determined to fight rather than simply fit in. The face-off between Pete Buttigieg and Jasmine Crockett showed that in politics, preparation consistently outperforms privilege. Crockett did more than defend her community. She publicly challenged a cabinet secretary and demonstrated what authentic representation looks like. If you found this breakdown insightful, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more analysis of pivotal moments in American politics. Which political figures do you think should face the same kind of challenge Crockett delivered? Share your thoughts in the comments below.